Hello and welcome to this edition of The Week in France. Coming up for you today, Sarkozy for president. He's set to announce his candidacy, but his ratings are at rock bottom. More on some of the lesser-known presidential hopefuls, and a Mexican exhibition makes it over to France despite a dispute between the two countries' leaders. But first, he's trailing behind his main rival in the polls. Nicolas Sarkozy will have to catch up with socialist candidate François Hollande if he's going to stand a chance in the elections this spring. Well, he's reportedly going to announce his candidacy this week. Why has it taken him such a long time? We take a look at why it's important to get the timing and the delivery right.
Is Nicolas Sarkozy finally ready to line up at the starting blocks? His main rival's presidential campaign is well underway, but the incumbent has been slow to declare his candidacy. He's not the first sitting president to draw out the suspense.
Êtes-vous à nouveau candidat à la présidence de la République? Oui.
He sounded as if he was surprised the question was asked at all, but François Mitterrand had waited until just a month before the first round of the 1988 presidential election to declare his candidacy. Despite his short campaign, he easily beat his main challenger, Jacques Chirac. But Chirac won next time round, and in 2002 he had his turn to declare his candidacy as a sitting president. Very different from his predecessor's simple declaration, it was a very public, stage-managed event over 2 months from election day.
On se la pose partout en France. Le président va-t-il déclarer sa candidature?
Oui, je suis candidat.
Like Mitterrand before him, Chirac won his second term. Indeed, in recent history, so far only one incumbent French president has failed in his re-election bid. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing later regretted the way he made his announcement. It was during a ponderous 10-minute broadcast, too long and too cold.
Mes chers amis, dans un peu plus de 50 jours, vous voterez pour le premier tour de l'élection présidentielle.
The timing and tone of Sarkozy's declaration will be carefully chosen by his campaign team, who above all want to avoid a false start.
Well, we hear a lot about Sarkozy and Hollande, but there are other lesser-known presidential hopefuls. They now have just over a month to submit their forms to get on the ballot. But first, each candidate needs the public support of at least 500 mayors or local officials. As this report explains, that's no small feat.
Nicolas Dupont-Aignan doesn't travel like a major presidential candidate. That's because he's not one. The founder of the Conservative Party, Arise the Republic, is running for president, but only 1% of voters say they'll support him. With such low numbers, it's difficult to draw a crowd.
Can I offer you a coffee? Well, at least encourage you to get one, because they don't have any money.
Today, Dupont-Aignan is meeting with around 50 supporters, an event that's covered by just a handful of journalists.
Why are you covering Nicolas Dupont-Aignan?
Because we're a small channel and it's not always easy for the presidential race to get the more popular candidates. They're not interested in our show.
The candidate isn't worried.
I can tell you now that we'll have the sponsorship and that things are going well.
By sponsorship, Dupont-Aignan means the 500 signatures needed from local officials to get on the presidential ballot. Meanwhile, the National Front candidate Marine Le Pen is polling at around 20%, but she's having difficulty obtaining the necessary signatures. Many officials have been unwilling to publicly back Le Pen. They've been afraid of being seen as too far to the right. Less popular candidates create less controversy, but have more trouble getting their word out.
That's what's turning us in circles. We're not sticking in the polls. People don't get interested. And in addition, there's a part of the media that's insisted the party won't make it, that we won't get the 500 signatures. So we still don't appear like a real candidacy.
Philippe Poutou doesn't turn down a single interview, but he hasn't been getting many requests as a candidate for the new anti-capitalist party.
It's not the same to say, I'm not going to vote to make a statement and saying, yes, I'm anti-capitalist and I'm going to vote to take money from the pockets of big companies and the wealthiest people.
Despite polling at 0%, Poutou says he'll get enough signatures to make it onto the ballot. The candidate continues to host meetings for supporters, but he never knows how many people will come.
You can't be sure.
The revolution could begin tomorrow, who knows?
On this night, only 30 people showed up, a sign Poutou's anti-capitalist revolution could be in crisis.
Brazil is thinking of changing its mind over the French Rafale jet. Perhaps the change of heart has got something to do with the fact that India just put in the first foreign order for the plane. Well, after turning its nose up at the jet, Brazil is now having a second look at the aircraft that's been on the market for more than a decade.
If the French Rafale fighter is taking off now, it has been a long time getting there. Launched in 1985, it was billed as state-of-the-art for combat aircraft, a technological jewel. So sophisticated, in fact, that it was hugely expensive, and it turned out unaffordable. Only the French army wanted it. French leaders went flat out to push sales on trade missions. It was hoped the Netherlands and South Korea would buy in 2002, Singapore in 2005, and Morocco in 2007. But it was the same story each time. The Rafale was highly thought of but lost out to cheaper American fighters. It's been a commercial dodo for years.
The Americans can't stand French competition at this level of technology, and so try everything to keep us out of the market.
Uncompetitive on price, the fighter could draw customers as part of a broader package.
France has shown that it's the most flexible as far as technology transfer is concerned, and this does represent exceptional comparative advantage.
Technology transfer from Dassault could be a deciding factor for the Brazilians. Brasilia, after 3 years of mulling, could be on the verge of buying 36 Rafales. India 2 weeks ago ordered 126 of the aircraft, and there are rumours the United Arab Emirates might buy.
This is very, very good news, not just for Dassault, but for the whole of the French aviation industry.
Neighbour Switzerland, too, is a potential customer. The Swedish manufacturer Saab won an initial contract offering for 22 Gripen fighters last November. However, a Swiss paper has published extracts of a confidential report suggesting the Swedish fighter is not sufficient for Swiss needs, although cheaper than the Rafale. The Swiss government decides on the contract in the coming days amid debate. If Dassault does get it, it will be a real sign the wind has turned.
It's time to dig deep into your old coat pockets and empty your piggy bank. Time's almost up for the French franc. Coins and notes will be worthless after this Friday. The franc was discontinued when the euro came into force a decade ago, but you could still exchange the old currency at the bank. Well, there are reportedly still 3 billion francs that haven't been exchanged, so it's now or never. Rugby fans are furious. France decided to cancel its Six Nations match with Ireland at the last minute. It was supposed to take place over the weekend, but the cold weather made the pitch freeze over. Irish supporters who'd come over for the game had to pack their bags and go home. Well, it was supposed to be the year of Mexico in France last year, but a diplomatic spat put an end to that. One exhibition did make it over, though. A rare collection of sacred Mayan masks is now on display near Madeleine in central Paris.
They're over 1,000 years old, but were hidden for centuries until their rediscovery 60 years ago. These burial masks, sculpted from jade, were worn by Mayan dignitaries on their journey into the next world.
Jade was a sacred stone, that it was closely related to nature. It also represented the vital breath and the renaissance of the soul.
These masks have crossed the Atlantic for the first time to be displayed at Paris's Pinakothek Museum. The exhibition was originally supposed to take place a year ago, but was cancelled amid the fallout from the Florence Cassez affair. In February 2011, a Mexican appeals court upheld the 60-year sentence of French woman Cassez on kidnapping and organised crime charges. It was 3 days before the official opening of the Year of Mexico in France, a year-long festival of cultural programmes. French President Nicolas Sarkozy dedicated the event to Cassez.
I am requesting that these events go ahead and that every official who has the chance to speak during them start by speaking about Florence Cassez and her situation, so that we do not forget her.
The Mexican government hit back by withdrawing its support for the festival. Over 300 exhibitions and events were cancelled, leaving participating artists frustrated and angry. A year later, the Mayan Mask exhibition is the only one of all the cancelled events to be rescheduled.
We were all taken hostage because two men couldn't manage to get on with each other. There's nothing to say except that it was completely absurd.
The Pinacothèque estimates the diplomatic row costed €4 million. It's not receiving any compensation.
If the French state doesn't have the tact to come to me and propose something, I'm not going to go begging. I could sue, but would that be a good idea?
The reprogrammed exhibition runs at the Pinacothèque until June.
And we end in Little Italy. Italian immigrants settled in the working-class suburb of Nogent-sur-Marne, east of the French capital, decades ago. Now there's a plan to put up a statue to honour the Italian community. But residents are furious over the choice of model for the statue. First Lady Carla Bruni Sarkozy. She may have Italian roots, but they say they feel no connection with her and that she's certainly not a good example of a working-class Italian immigrant. However, the local mayor is a fan of Sarkozy and says that there's no going back on the decision. The statue is due to be finished after the spring's presidential election. Well, that's it for this edition of The Week in France. Thanks for watching and goodbye.